Chapter 5. "What the hell happened?" Mac said when he saw the blood on my shirt. I was puffing away on one of his customary menthols while Blue did her business in the alley. "Don't worry," I said. "It's mine." "Oh, well, that's a relief," Mac said. He has a long relationship with sarcasm. I said, "Don't worry about it. Did Andy do that? You didn't do that to her face, did you?" I couldn't muster enough self-righteousness to be offended. Considering how close I'd come to ripping the head off the woman who had actually shot me, I couldn't blame Mac for wondering. But it hit me like a punch in the gut to think that he wondered if I could have done that to a young kid like Andy. "No. I'm sorry, Red," he said. "It's just, I've seen how you can lose it when you get hurt. In the moment, you know." He wasn't wrong. We stood there for a minute, thinking about memories we both would rather avoid discussing, and averting our eyes to give Blue a modicum of dignity while she hunched her back and dropped a fresh steaming load beside somebody's freshly washed Volvo. "You look like shit," he said, no doubt inspired by Blue. "Thanks," I said. "Seriously, Frank." He lowered his voice. "I know you're tough. You've got, your thing. Hell, we've known each other, what now, 50 years? I don't keep track. 50 years sounded about right. What's your point?" "My point? When I met you, you were older than me." "I still am," I said. "Right. Well, you don't look it. You look younger than my damn son." "Healthy living," I said, taking a long drag of the borrowed cigarette for emphasis. He didn't laugh. "My ass," he said. "You look like hell. You've got rings under your eyes, you've lost weight. I swear, you look like you should be singing in one of those grunge bands." "I don't sing," I lied. He sighed and dropped the subject, finally taking the hint. "So, what happened at the trailer park?" "They were getting ready to offer," I said. "No kidding? Damn, she's in deeper than I thought." "In what?" I asked. "Drugs," he said. "She's been hanging around the wrong people and got picked up on a bust. Her old man talked her into cutting a deal and testifying. But she got scared and ran off? Yeah, about a week ago." "Smart kid," I said. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that she knows better than to turn stooly on guys like this." "Guys like who? And Jesus, Red, stooly? Who talks like that anymore?" I ignored his jab. "Some bikers. A newbie named Rudy and some shot caller named Lodi. Ring any bells?" "Yeah," he said. "One of them anyway. Lodi. I've heard of that one. Bikers and their dumb nicknames. What have you heard?" "His real name's Vargas. Carl Vargas out of California. He's connected. I think he's done some time. He has what they call anger management issues. He's served, too. Lots of these bikers have. I think he was a Marine, like you." "Well, this Vargas character was on his way with the new guy to ice her when I got there. I overheard a phone call to your snitch. She had a last-minute change of heart." I touched my waist, where Rita's bullet was making me wish I'd brought more Vicodin. I thought longingly of the bag of heroin I'd lifted, just waiting for me in the back of my blazer. "You didn't make a mess, did you?" Mac sounded concerned. "No," I said, finishing the menthol and holding out my hand for another. "No bodies." It was close, though. Mac let out a relieved sigh and handed me another smoke. I lit it and then whistled for Blue. She came running. "I'm sorry about the timing," Mac said, "but you can see why I couldn't send somebody else." "What about your kid?" I asked. "Isn't your boy still a cop?" "Owen? Yeah, Mac beamed. He's a detective sergeant now. So why not have him pull some strings, raid the place? Wrong county. Those bikers live out in the sticks by your place for a reason. Jurisdiction bullshit. How do you think it would have gone if some county sheriff had come knocking on doors? Yeah, I said. My side hurt. I guess so. Frank, Mac sounded serious. Do you even know what county you were in? Mac means well, but he worries about the dope. He always has. He thinks I'm going to hurt myself, and he doesn't understand that my body doesn't work the same as everybody else's. What would kill most people just gives me a pleasant nap. How about your girl? She's still acing school? I asked. This wasn't the time to talk about me. School? Shit, Frank, you don't even know what year this is, do you? I took a long drag of the cigarette and tried not to look like I was thinking too hard about that question. Luckily, the tags on Mac's SUV were always current. 1995, I said, casually. The number surprised me, but I wasn't about to let Mac know that he'd been right. Yeah, 95. Marie finished med school in 84, and Owen hasn't been in school since he joined the force in 78. Frank, you worry me sometimes. Drop it, Mac, I said quietly. All right, Frank, all right, Mac said. I'm sorry again that I pulled you into this. Thanks for handling it. Forget about it, I said. Just pay up and let me get home. Why don't you come in for some coffee, Mac offered. Clear your head. Let Marilyn patch you up. Just pay me, Mac, I said. It's getting late. Right, okay, Mac sounded disappointed. Mac turned to his big blue Suburban, a newer model that he kept waxed and sparkling. He pulled out his keys and opened the door, then turned to rummage around in his back seat. He returned, struggling to hold a cardboard box, which he attempted to hand to me. I didn't take it. What the hell is this? I looked in the box and saw groceries? Canned stew, a few pounds of hamburger, and dog food. No beer. Consider this a bonus, Mac smiled, breathing heavy. A bonus is what you give somebody on top of their payment, I said, as Mac walked past me and set the box on the hood of my Chevy. After that phone bill I paid for you, you're lucky not to owe me any money, he said, frowning. I never asked you to. You're welcome, he said. I was too tired to be angry. Besides, the dogs and I needed the food. But I'd be damned if I was going to thank him. I opened the back seat and slid the box in. Mac raised an eyebrow as he saw the gym bag on the floor behind the driver's seat. What's that? Mac asked. Mine. Red, the kid's a junkie, I said, dodging the subject. What? Andy, she's a dope fiend. I could smell it on her. Damn. I thought so, but I was hoping I was wrong. I don't know why I told him that. I'd like to think it was because I was worried about Andy and her baby and knew that Mac would help her. But honestly, I think it may have just been to shut him up about the bag. I thought about letting him know that she was pregnant, too, but decided that I'd already spilled enough of her beans. That was her business to handle. She'd tell him if she wanted to. I wanted to ask about Andy, but Mac probably wouldn't know anything that would explain the things about her that puzzled me. The emerald in her eye, or the way she smelled like springtime. Besides, the longer I let Mac talk, the more chances he'd have to try and talk me inside for coffee, so he could try another damn intervention. I was in no mood. I opened the door to the front of the Blazer, and Blue jumped in to take her customary place riding shotgun. Mac gave her an affectionate rub on the jowls, and she lolled her tongue blissfully before he closed the door. I opened my door and got in. "Red, I'm worried about you." "Don't be." "It don't work that way. Too bad. Don't be an ass, Frank," he said. "We've got to talk. I'm going to come up to your dump on Monday to see you. That should give you a couple days to ride out your thing. So don't bite my head off when I show up." "Fine," I said, and started the engine. The western sky was clearing to my left as I drove home, giving me a good view of the last bits of sunset over the water and, further behind, the snow-capped Olympic Mountains. To my right, the Cascade foothills were still shrouded in the clouds that had recently given us our late blanket of slush. It looked like it was going to be a clear sky tonight, but it would be a bad evening for stargazers. The moon would be reaching her fullness a little after 2 in the morning, and her light would be overpowering. That thought, along with the pain in my hip, made me break out in a cold sweat. I could do a lot to hold back the wolf. I had done a lot in the last few hours. But after everything I'd just gone through, there was no way I'd have what it would take to keep him locked down when the moon crested. The actual moment of the full moon is another matter. People think of a full moon as something that happens over the course of a night or even a couple nights, and they aren't far wrong. Actually, there is one precise moment, just a heartbeat really, when the moon is full. Sometimes it happens at night and sometimes in the middle of the day. Each month is different. This is the climax of the lunar cycle, when she stops growing in the sky and starts waning. And this is the moment when the wolf in me gets his way. No matter what. I make damn sure to be locked up and far away from people when that moment comes. I spotted Andy's unfinished cigarette in my ashtray and lit it, drawing deep to steady my nerves. The taste of her was still on it where her lips had been. She tasted like maple blossoms. I tried not to think about that. I finished the cigarette as I crossed the Skagit River and rolled down the window to toss it out, but I hesitated and put the cigarette out in the ashtray where Andy had left it for a change. I drove past the exit where Andy and I had pulled onto the interstate, too close to home. A couple of miles later, I was passing out of the Skagit Valley and climbing into the wooded hills where I lived. The slush along the road was more serious up here. Almost snow, but not quite. They were building something along the interstate by my exit. A big construction project. Some kind of hotel or casino, I'd heard. That was too close, too. I didn't like it. It didn't take more than 10 or 15 minutes on the country roads to arrive at the entrance to my place. Not that anybody else would think of it as an entrance. I pulled off at a locked gate that seemed to be restricting access to a thin spot between trees and blackberry bushes. "Stay," I told Blue as I hopped out and fumbled with the combination lock, unwrapped the chain, and swung the rusty gate open with a push. Then I climbed back into the Blazer, pulling past the gate, leaving Blue once more to lock the gate behind us. The entrance to my place was almost completely overgrown with grass, low-hanging tree branches, and blackberry bushes, to the point that it was nearly impossible to tell that the place was there at all, and I liked it that way. Sure, I couldn't get in and out of a car close to the gate without getting a few scratches on my hands or leaves in my hair, but I judged that inconvenience a small price to pay for a little extra privacy. I carefully pulled a particularly thick branch of blackberry thorns from the side of my field jacket before squeezing back into the driver's seat. I was feeling my years as I pulled forward through the brush. Branches and thorns scraped against my blazer, a few more scratches would make no difference, and parted to reveal the mossy clearing where I kept the old aluminum travel trailer. Blue sat up excitedly as the rest of her pack came bounding and barking towards us into my headlights. I put the Chevy in park and opened the passenger door first, allowing Blue to exit and accept the brunt of the welcoming frenzy. Smedley, the only member of the pack who rivaled Beatrice for reliability and character, took the lead. But soon the 7 other dogs that made up our pack of strays all joined the fray, and I couldn't help but smile a little despite myself. If a pack of happy dogs making fools of themselves doesn't make you smile, then nothing can. When I stepped out of the car, all 9 dogs ran to surround and welcome me. They knew better than to jump or nip at me as they had with Blue. They recognized the predator in me as the biggest and most dominant member of the pack, and were instinctively submissive. Cold noses politely nudged the back of my hands as others snuffled at my pant legs. I rubbed their heads and patted their sides in descending order of their rank in the pack hierarchy. Even though she had been with me on my outing, I acknowledged Blue first, along with Smedley, so that the others would know that I recognized the pair as dominant over the rest of them. After that, I rubbed the ears of Patton, the scarred black-and-white pit mix, who was a close runner-up for dominance. Then came Winston, a pudgy bulldog who demanded his share of respect in the pack with sheer stubbornness and an absurd sort of dignity. Next in the hierarchy, by virtue of his ridiculous size, was Lenny. The good-natured and slightly stupid mutt weighed more than I did. He was easily the biggest, dumbest, and possibly the sweetest member of my little pack. I wasn't sure of his heritage, but his shaggy gray hair and floppy ears made me think there was some wolfhound in his bloodline somewhere, along with a generous serving of horse. Next came Fred. The anxious mutt looked part Doberman and part collie, and could never seem to hold still. He was skittish and prone to biting any hand but mine. I suspect he'd been beaten before he joined my little pack. Norma Jean and Nettle, one as elegant as the other was prickly, came next. Last came Oliver, an old, stubby-legged mutt with some obvious beagle ancestry and an obnoxious tendency to beg and whine. He was the oldest, but also the smallest and least dominant of the group. Reaching back into the blazer, I pulled out the box of groceries that Mac had pushed on me and placed it on the hood. I held up one palm for the dogs to see, and they immediately fell silent, sitting in place. I ripped open a bag of dry kibble and emptied it onto the ground beside the blazer. All the dogs wagged their tails and licked their chops ferociously, but knew better than to make a move yet. Oliver let loose a pathetic whine before Patton snarled and snapped at him, shutting him up. I went on to empty a pack of hamburger meat onto the bag's contents, courtesy of Mac's generosity. I took a small pinch of the hamburger and ate it, letting the pack see me do it. The alpha eats first. I like my meat rare, but not raw. I intended to cook my supper inside. The metallic and juicy sensations of the cold meat on my tongue had the wolf rumbling in his cage. Wait. Almost. Soon. The dogs stayed in place, watching me attentively as I retrieved the gym bag from the back seat and limped with the box of groceries and my bag of ill-gotten gains toward my trailer. Okay. As soon as I whispered the word that released them to their feast, Blue and Smedley dove into the food and took their pick of the meat and kibble, before Patton and the rest of the pack joined in. I set the box on a rusted folding chair beside the door and took off my jacket and sunglasses. No point in making a mess inside. I peeled off my bloodied shirt and tossed it into the steel drum that I occasionally use for fires, and took off my belt before pulling my pants down a couple of inches, examining the hole in my hip where Rita had shot me. It was swollen and crusted over, purple around the edges. This was going to hurt. Shirtless in the snow, I walked to the nearest tree, a mossy birch, and braced myself against a low, hanging branch thicker than my leg. I doubled the leather belt over in my hand and then folded it over again, before putting the thumb-thick hide between my teeth. "All right, you son of a bitch, do your thing." I looked up at the night sky, and my eyes found the nearly full moon peeking at me from behind the retreating clouds. I felt the wolf rise up inside me, like boiling water against a pot lid, heat filling my limbs and shooting into my fingers and toes. My nails hardened and dug into the tree branch. My teeth sharpened and punctured the belt, and a low, rumbling growl began to grow in my chest and throat. I felt a burning in my hip and a writhing sensation, like worms crawling through my flesh where the bullet had lodged itself. I looked down and saw the flesh pucker as something moved beneath my skin. Then the bullet, the size of a child's tooth, pushed itself out of the hole and fell to the ground. The wound itself oozed a small rivulet of blood, but then sealed itself before my eyes. The injury wasn't gone, but nobody who saw it would believe that it had happened today. The belt dropped from my mouth, and the wolf howled at the waves of pain. I let him have his moment. The dogs grew silent and hid behind or beneath the blazer, laying low to the ground in submission. They were in no danger if they stayed out of the way. They were our pack. The pain and anger of the day's events, along with some portion of the residual frustration and pain of my unnaturally long life, found its way to my arms. The tree branch, thicker than my leg, snapped like a twig. The rest came out of my mouth in something like a scream. I heard the biggest dog, Lenny, whimper in fear. They knew better than to run. Pack or not, if they ran, the wolf would have had to give chase. In the dim corner of my mind, I decided to redirect the wolf by giving him something he wanted. Instead of anger and pain, I focused on my hunger, on the burning emptiness in my gut. I felt it more keenly now after healing. My nose twitched, and my heightened Garot senses locked onto the rich, coppery scent of the bloody meat sitting in the grocery box. All thoughts of cooking it had fled my mind. I tore into the packaging with my teeth and scarfed the pound of raw meat. Its weight in my stomach gave me just enough control to open the next package with my hands, but I ate it just as greedily. It was glorious. After eating, I crouched there in the snow and reveled in the feeling of a full belly and the night air on my bare skin. Soon, my dogs joined me. They licked the beef blood from my hands and face while I nuzzled at them affectionately. Slowly, exhaustion took hold, and the wolf gave way again to the man. I rose from the ground, stiff and cold, and I grabbed a handful of wet snow in my hands and rubbed it on my face before walking back to the now broken birch tree. I felt almost like I should apologize to the poor thing. On the ground, I saw the spatter of blood I'd left before, and I bent to retrieve the ridiculously small piece of metal that had been causing me such grief all afternoon. I didn't risk looking at it again, but I could feel in my bones that the moon hadn't yet crested. There was time yet, and when it came, the wolf wouldn't be satisfied with some broken wood and a couple pounds of hamburger. It was time to get inside. I unlocked and opened the door to step into the dark trailer. I was quickly joined by Tybalt. I fumbled with my old Coleman lantern, and it burst to life with a low hiss, casting deep shadows with its dim light. I closed the door and dropped the bullet into the mason jar by the stove, adding it to my collection. It was cold in the trailer, maybe colder than it had been outside. I'd run out of propane sometime in February, but at least it was dry and there was no wind. "Maggie sends her love," I said. Evelyn sat in her chair, exactly where I knew she would be waiting for me. She didn't say anything. She sat quietly and looked at me with that sweetly sad smile she always had for me. I couldn't look at her. "She's not doing too well, but she misses you," I said. Evelyn didn't speak. I found a half-finished beer that I'd left open who knew how long ago, and appended it. It was flat, but very cold. I pretended not to notice what was probably a fly. "I had a hell of a day," I told my wife. "Max sent me after this kid. She was tough. Reminded me of you. You'd like her." Evelyn didn't say anything. I placed the gym bag on the kitchen table and sat down to finally open it. Let's see what we have here. There were pounds of heroin, neatly wrapped and packaged inside. I'd known that the bikers were in the dope-selling game, but I had no idea they were in it so deep. Damn. Pounds of it. If the stuff was any good, and it smelled like it was, I was holding hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of heroin. I sat and pondered the contents of the bag for a few long minutes. "Well, no point in just staring at it," I said, as I walked past my wife to fetch the pipe from my bed. Evelyn didn't say anything. I loaded the pipe well beyond what anybody else could expect to smoke alone, and carried it back to my bed. Given the choice, smoking was my preferred road to oblivion, but I'd just eat the stuff if I had to. Whatever it took to get the job done. Well, anything but needles. I'm deathly afraid of needles. I ain't proud of it, but if I'm being honest, nothing triggers my fight-or-flight instincts like somebody coming at me with a syringe. It's an old terror of mine, and one that isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Sitting down, I found the handcuffs and combination bicycle lock and steel cable that I left attached to the frame. I cuffed my ankle to the trailer and threw the key across the room, out of my reach. Getting loose was no problem for me. All I had to do was enter the combination to the padlock, and I'd be free to walk over and get the key to the cuffs. Easy. Easy for a man, anyway. Not so easy for a wolf. What would be easy would be to use that Garot's strength to rip the cable from the frame. At least, it would be easy if I weren't so high on heroin that I couldn't open my eyes. The moon would crest and the wolf would take over, sure. But by then, all he'd be taking over would be my limp body and drug-addled dreams. It was a system that hadn't failed me since I'd started it several years earlier. From the corner of my eye, I could see Evelyn looking at me with disgust and disapproval. I deserved it. "I'm sorry," I said as I lit the pipe. Rita really hadn't been lying. The dope was good. "I'm sorry, Evelyn," I said again as I took another hit. Evelyn didn't say anything. Soon I had finished the pipe, and I could feel the warm wave of the high washing over me, burying the wolf in the comfortable oblivion. The moon was almost full. My eyes were closed, and I lay curled on my side on my shabby bed. I felt my wife join me, slipping into the bed behind me, pressed against me. "I'm sorry, Evelyn," I said, the tears starting to come. The ghost of my long-dead wife put her arm over me and held me there as I started to fade. "I'm sorry I killed you." Evelyn didn't say anything. She never did.